So this happened a few years ago when I was 17. I used to visit my brother and sister in Tempe, Arizona, during school breaks because my town is incredibly boring. While they're at work, I'd go off and do some exploring on my own. And one day, I decided to get on a bus and head to the mall. The bus I got on was called the Orbit. They're free and they're small buses, like half the size of regular ones. It took 2 buses to get there, with a stop at the station in between. I went in and did my shopping and took the first bus back to the station. Whilst waiting for the second bus, I met this guy around my age and we made conversation. I asked him what bus I should take because I wasn't familiar with the streets, and he pointed me to the right one. I get on the bus and the guy gets on as well, and we continue our conversation for a while until he has to get off. After he gets off, I put my earphones on and kind of space out, watching the sun start to set. And after a while, I realized that none of the streets look familiar to the ones that I had seen earlier. I start to get a weird feeling in my stomach, so I pick up a map that they have available and notice that I'm definitely on the wrong bus. I get a little more nervous seeing how it was already getting dark, and to make matters worse, my phone was on like 3%. I know the buses go on a circuit, so I just sit back and try to figure out what time I'll make it back to the station to see when I'll catch the right bus. As I'm reading the map, the last people on the bus get off and the driver starts talking to me.
Hey,
He calls out from the front.
are you lost?
I must admit that I was a little thrown off, but I told him that I had gotten on the wrong bus. He said okay, and then shortly after, he pulls into a really dark neighborhood and pulls over to the side of the road. I know buses usually have to pull over at stops for a bit if they're ahead of schedule and stuff, so I figured that that's what the driver was doing. But instead, he gets up and starts to head towards me. He's also a big man, around 6 foot and maybe 200 pounds. He grabs a map, sits down right next to me, and starts asking me a lot of questions like, what bus are you supposed to be taking? Do you go to ASU? How old are you? I was trying to be courteous, but as our conversation kept going, my heart was racing faster and faster. And the last question that he asked me made me start to get really nervous.
So, is anyone expecting you?
I told him yes, that my brother was, and he gets up and starts heading to the front. Finally, I thought. He gets to his seat and instead of sitting down, he shuts the doors and turns off the lights in the fucking bus. So, I'm sitting there in the dark, shaking and almost crying, and I see the silhouette of his shadow head back to me and sit right next to me again. As soon as he sits down next to me, something just snaps at me, and I jump up and run towards the doors of the bus as fast as I can and start banging and pushing on them until they open. I get out and ran as fast as I could to a store or a restaurant because my battery was completely drained at this point. As I'm running, I hear him yell out behind me, and then I see him drive by super fast, and luckily, he didn't stop again. I ran for several blocks until I reached a cell phone store and burst in there crying and asking for a charger. And from there, I called my brother and he came to pick me up. And I was in the complete opposite side of town too. When my brother picked me up, I told him what happened, and he said that he was going to call the bus company and report the driver. That I should have been more careful, but at the time, I was just a naive teenager, so what did I know? Unfortunately, I don't know what happened to the driver, but man, that was a totally sketchy situation.